Well, good morning, Victory. So we're going to play a little game. Do you guys ever watch Price is Right? Do you remember Price is Right? It's still on. Yeah, some people are really excited about Price. They're like, we're going to get a car. You're not going to get a car. All right, so, whoo. Second service is hyped today about Price is Right. All right, so here's what we're going to do. I'm going to ask a question, and you're going to do the kind of higher, lower thing, all right? So if you think I'm going to ask a question, I'm going to give a number. When I give the number, you either give me the thumbs up and say higher, right, or the thumbs down and say lower, or I guess the thumb in the middle is right there, okay? So the question today is, how many advertisements, how many messages, or what I call how many secular sermons do you think you hear, see, engage with every day, all right? Products that are trying to get in your head. How many? We'll start, pretty good number, right? How many do you think, all right, we're going to go with the number 125. Where do we think we're at? Higher, some think lower. All right, how about 400? Higher, okay, how about like 1,000? Higher, you're right. How about 2,500? Yeah. I love it. We're slowly dropping out like, I don't know the answer. I don't know. He's going to trick me like he did with the weird word thing last time. Right? Yeah. Guys, it's higher. 5,000. That's a conservative estimate. 5,000 advertisements, messages, secular sermons, and some experts say it could go all the way up to 10,000, depending on whether you have your ad blocker on and how much TV you're watching, all right? So somewhere between 5 and 10,000 advertisements, messages, secular sermons, and most of them are telling you you need fixed, right? There is something wrong with you, and that don't worry, everything's okay. They have the answer, right? And so you watch these and you're either, too fat or too thin or not enough hair or too much hair. I don't know. All this stuff that they tell you is wrong. And they say, but don't worry, if you just take this pill, we'll fix it. But of course, then you start to see the side effects of the pill. And they're worse than the symptoms you have right now. And every time they try to fix it, they're telling you there's something wrong with you. You are broken. You have troubles and problems. But if you'll just aspire to be a part of our brand, if you'll just wear our logo on your shirt or put your stuff, right? If you'll allow your identity to be wrapped up in us, we can fix it. They're always trying to fix your problems. I saw this straight on, head first, when I went, my wife and I, Sherry, we got to go on a vacation. We were fortunate enough to go on a cruise together. We went to they had this little free spa tour, right? The beautification area. And they walked in and we get to this one guy and apparently he does something with your face, right? And so we get in and he looks at Shara and he goes, oh, she's so beautiful. And I was like, you're right. And then he looks at me and he goes, now this I can work with. And I was like, also true, tell me more. Right? He wanted to fix me. And the way he told me that he wanted to fix me was by letting me know that I was broken, that there was something wrong with me. And we hear these messages. There's always someone competing for our ear, for our time, and for our money, trying to tell us that if we would just find our identity in their product, if we would just do things the way they say we should, they'll fix us because we're broken. That's the message they're telling us. We are broken. There's a art form in Asia called kintsugi, right? And you may have heard of it or seen it. The idea is there are these ceramic pots or bowls that eventually would break, right? When you have nice, fragile things, they break eventually, as all of us with toddlers know. Eventually they will break. And they wanted to get these things fixed, so they would send them off. They think somewhere around the 15th century, they would send them off and they would glue stuff together. They would actually drill holes and then put these metal staples in it. And so what happened is when the bowl or the pot came back, it looked worse than it did before, and the beauty was gone. Well, eventually what somebody figured out with these bowls is they could take them and they could put kind of a lacquer on the inside that was mixed with gold dust. And they would push these pieces together. And then eventually what you would see is there would be a seam down that they would then put gold around. We actually have one of the bowls right here. If you could kind of get a tight shot on that, I think you guys can see it. What happened was the fix actually became more beautiful than the original piece of artwork. The gold and the beauty, these became collectibles. And what they actually found is that people then would take these like expensive pots and bowls and they would crash them on purpose so they could send them off to these artists to have them fixed, to have them mended, to have their beauty actually increased in the midst of their brokenness. And see, why the world comes to us and tells us we can fix you. What I have found is oftentimes the fix that they give us, the side effects are worse than the symptoms that we had before. Right? When someone comes and tells me that I'm broken, but if I'll just listen to them, if I'll just hand my identity over to who they are, they can make everything better. And what happens is just like those early ceramic pieces, they would take their staples and they would drive them into me. And it caused pain, and it caused hurt, and it caused frustration. And it never worked out the way they said it did. I was never as good as they said that I was going to be, and they never accepted me the way that they said they were going to. Because the fact of the matter is, every one of us has an innate sense inside of us that we want to be known, and we want to be loved, and we want to be accepted, and we want to be valued. That's a drive that we all have. You may not know it, you may not even participate in it, but it's there. And C.S. Lewis tells us, he says that every desire that we have is actually proof of something there to help fix that desire, right? If you're like me, you're often hungry, right? And the way, right? Hunger is a sign that there is something there that can fix said hunger. For me, food, a lot of food, right? It's a sign that says if you're thirsty, your body, when it gets thirsty, it's letting you know that there's something out there that can quench your thirst, right? If it's water or soda or sweet tea, even though we don't have that in New York, right? And so, I'm just saying that there's something out there that can quench that thirst. C.S. Lewis says that our desire for eternity, for our fear of kind of death and our desire to last forever shows us that there is something there that can help fix that can help quench that thirst. And I would say that this desire that we have to be known, to be loved, to be valued and accepted for who we are, that there is a natural fix to that. It is a natural desire that points to something that is fixed. And this is kind of two parts of what we're going to talk about today. The first part is for all of us. You see, because every one of us have that desire. Every one of us have the drive to be known. And what's weird is that in the culture that we're in right now, we can know more about each other than we've ever been able to before. Right, through Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and LinkedIn and whatever other social thing that you may use, right? You can know more about your neighbor down the road than you ever wanted to know. Right now, you can know more about that family member that you used to only see once a year, and now you know why you only saw them once a year. You may find out stuff about your spouse. You're like, where did that come from, right? But in this sense of knowing, we know more about each other, but we know each other less. Because there is a fear that the more you know about me, the more you understand my brokenness, the more you understand my flaws, the more you understand the mistakes that I have made and am going to make, you won't like me anymore, let alone love me. And there's a deep, innate desire among everyone in this room, everyone walking, to be known, to be accepted, to be valued, and to be loved. And what I can promise you here today is there is only one who knows everything about you and loves you. There is only one who is worthy of speaking your identity to you. There is only one who will tell you that you are loved, that you are valued. There is one who can tell you that he created you and loves you and wants you to find your identity in him. Here's what I can promise you this morning. You are valued, you are loved, and you are accepted by your Creator. But what happens next is we have to choose to engage with that relationship. When we then decide that we are going to engage in that relationship, that we are going to put our faith, our hope, and trust in that God who loves us, who cares for us, who knows everything about us and loves us anyway, something changes in our life. There is a radical reorientation of our lives towards caring about all of this and caring about what you think and caring about what he thinks and caring about this radical reorientation in our life where we take our identity back from the world, back from all those secular sermons, back from all those ads and messages, and we put it firmly in the hands of the only one who knows everything and loves us just the same. And when that happens, our lives are changed forever. Our lives are radically transformed. And that's what Paul is saying in 2 Corinthians when he's writing to the church in Corinth and saying, look, this is who you are now. If you have your bulletin or program, you can open it up. There should be 2 scriptures on a piece of paper there. We're going to kind of hit the first one and then use the second one to sort of unpack what we're saying. But in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17, this is what Paul says. He says, therefore, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old is gone and the new is here. He says, if you find yourself in Christ, if you find yourself as one who is seeking after Jesus, he says, if you will take your identity and you will place it in him, and you can come to this place in your life where you're not looking to others for your value. You're not looking to others for how important you are, whether you are loved or whether you are known. Because the fact of the matter is when we do that, the world will start giving us prescription after prescription after prescription. They'll tell us how they can fix all of the problems. And then they'll lay out all the stuff that's wrong with us. And they shame us and they guilt us into fitting into the mold that whoever is selling their product wants us to fit into. And you look through the magazines and you watch TV and you click on the articles and it tells you all the stuff that's wrong with you. All the things that you've done. All the body stuff that you don't have. And when you eventually will burn out trying to impress and trying to earn love and value from the people around you. And it is freeing when we can take all of that out of their hands and give it to Jesus. When we can find ourselves in Christ. Because now as a new creation, I don't have to deal with the hang-ups of the old me. Can you imagine how freeing it is to walk into this room and look at somebody and say, you know what, I love you, I think you're a great person, but what you think about me isn't where I find my value. Can you imagine telling your people at your workplace, going in and saying, look, I love you guys, I hope everything's great, but whether or not you give me a promotion or whether or not you think I'm doing a great job, that is not where I find my identity. I am a new creation in Christ. I have given him the responsibility of caring for my identity. And when we are in Christ, it says we are new. A newness, and that old stuff, we can give it up. We don't have to be tied in bondage to that. And see, all those cracks and all those mistakes and all that stuff that we've been dealing with before can now be healed and covered up by the golden grace of God. And what we find is when we encounter him, this healed product, this individual that we are that has met him, that has placed our hope, our trust, and faith in him, is more beautiful than anything that we could have been before. Because we are now finding our purpose. You see, all of us were created. We are all loved, and we were all created for a purpose in this life. And every place you put your identity, any place you go tries to tell you what your purpose is. And see, what people call us, how people describe us, that affects our reality. The words that we use affect our reality because then we start to allow those words to tell our story. We start to have those words define who we are, and it starts to change the way we engage with that. So if all we hear is these negative terms of who we are, you're not this, you're not good enough, you're not strong enough, you're not fast enough, you're not good looking enough, you're not smart enough, you're not holy enough, you don't look the right way, you don't act the right way, you're not from the right place or the right side of the when we embody that sort of negative words in our lives, it affects the reality around us. They have shown studies of this. A few years ago, they did a study in a hospital. They had nurses use negative language when talking about the pain that their patients were experiencing. So when they would say things like, how bad is your pain? Is it getting worse? Is the sting worse than it was before? How bad are you feeling right now? When they used that sort of language, the pain threshold kept going up. And every time they would rate their pain a little higher, a little higher, a little higher. But when they came in and said things like, are you feeling better? How is it going now? Are things getting better in the way that every time they did that, the pain rating got lower and lower and lower, even though they were giving people the same medication. Why? Because the words that we use to describe ourselves, the stories that we tell about ourselves, and the lies that we believe about ourselves shape our reality. And if I allow someone else who doesn't love me, who doesn't care about me, who didn't create me, who doesn't find me valuable, to define my identity, it hurts. Every time, it hurts. And then when they tell me that they can fix me, the side effects are always worse than the symptoms I felt before. And so the way that Paul describes this in the church to Ephesus, in Ephesians 4:22, this is what he says. He says, you were taught with regard to your former way of life to put off your old self, which is being corrupted by its deceitful desires, and be made new in the attitude of your minds, to put on the new self, created to be like God in true righteousness and holiness. What is he saying? The image here is, in essence, we are taking off the dirtiness, the filthiness. We're taking off this old sort of shame and this old guilt and this old sense of that I'm only valuable if you find me valuable, and I am putting on something entirely different that is clean, that is new. I think this will help. I don't know how you guys are in your living or work spaces. When you go to college, a lot of times they have you fill out these little surveys, right? In the survey, you kind of describe yourself. I like this, or I do this. And one of the, I think like college admissions people, they look at it and then they go, how big of an opposite can we find? It's unbelievable how, let's put funny names together. I don't know what they do, but those things never seem to work the way they're supposed to. But when I had mine, they sort of had different divisions of how you like your living space, right? There's like kind of the moderate lived in. And then there's like clean. And then there's like share a Duvall surgical room, okay? That's right? And then you have lived in, and then you have dirty, and then you have pigsty, and then you have normal freshman boys room, right? Okay, so that's kind of the span, everything from normal freshman boy to my wife, Shara, right? That's the cleanliness side. And so when I check that box, I check lived in. right? Because it just makes sense to me. If you're living in some place, it should look like there's a human presence there, okay? Like lived in, right? If you come to my office, some of the offices, these people, they keep them so clean and perfect, like there's books and they're by colors and name and author and subject and everything's just perfect and it's, and then you come to my office and it's less perfect, all right? Like it looks like someone lives there. It looks like someone works there. It looks like, someone might have died there, okay? Like it's just different, all right? I mean, I don't have books on my shelf. I have them on my desk because I'm using the books, right? And the papers aren't filed away. They're where they should be so I can find them. And, some of you that are OCD right now, you're sweating, and that's okay because I have towels too, And so, like, I have anything you need right there in the room, okay? So lived in Aaron leaning towards a little more lived in. Married, surgical room cleanliness Shara. Because love is all you need. You can see the problem, right? Okay. One day, our first year of marriage, I don't remember what I was doing, but I was out in the yard doing something. And I had gotten dirty, and I was probably trimming something, and I'm sweaty, and I'm dirty, and my shoes have mud on them, and my jeans have stuff, and I come in, I just want to come in the house. It was hot outside, and it was cool in the house, and so I come in the house, and I walk into our porch that Shara had, just if you know Shara at all, she had just decorated it beautifully, and she had these curtains that were down, and I walk in to the front porch, I close the door, I go to the door, and I go to open the door, and it's locked. And I'm like, you can't lock this door from the outside. Like it doesn't do that. And so I try it again, I look up, and then through the window of the door, I see my wife, Shara, just smiling at me very sweetly. And I'm like, I need in. And she's like, no. I'm like, this is my house. She's like, you think it's your house. And so she tries to start explaining something to me, right? And I don't understand what she's saying. She's talking. And finally I see she gets a piece of paper, she writes down, she holds it up to the window and it says, take off your clothes. And I'm like, I like where this is going. She said something earlier. When I'd have done all this silly talking stuff. Good night, I'm just like. And so I turn around, and as I'm taking off my clothes, I hear the door open and shut, and I turn around, and the door is locked again, and there's sweatpants laying on the ground. And I'm like, what is this? She's like, put it on. I'm like, this is not going how I expected. You tricked me. And so I put the sweatpants on, I throw this hoodie on, and then she unlocks the door and she goes, go to the bathroom and take a shower. I said, why? She says, you are filthy. I'm like, but the house, this is how you live. And she said, and I will never get this, that is not how you live in this house. Right? But that's the image that we're getting from this text, that we take all the filthiness off, that we take all the old clothes off, right? All of the shame that we hold, all of the guilt that we hold, all of the times that I thought that I had to look to you for my value, and because of that, I lessened myself. And all the times that I was hurt because the people that I thought loved me hurt me and didn't think I was good enough. And all the times that I put my identity in my clothes or in my stuff or in my car or in my job, and all of that we get to take off. And when we're in Christ, we don't have to deal with that junk anymore. And we get to put on the clothes of peace and joy and love and acceptance and value. Because we don't find our identity in the secular sermons, the messages, or the ads of the world. We don't find our identity in the person beside us or down the pew or the one on the stage. We are in Christ, and Christ is in us. And we find our meaning, and we find our value, and we find our purpose, and we find our identity in Him. And all of those wounds slowly start to heal. Now listen, there's a lot of us who we get frustrated when we come to church a few times and we hear a few sermons and we say a few prayers and we don't understand why things have just not gotten fixed. I've had couples come to me for pastoral care in marriage, and they'll sit down and they'll start unloading and unpacking all of the pains and hurts and struggles and frustrations that they have with one another. And I'll say, well, how long are we going to meet today? Generally, the husband goes, about an hour. I say, well, how many times are you going to meet? I'll give you 3. And my response is always, listen, guys, I cannot fix in 3 hours what you have put upon yourself over the last 8 years. I can't do it. And it takes time, through that pastor says, through the renewing of our mind, through the changing of our thoughts, through every day taking our identity out of the hands of those around us and putting it in Christ. And slowly, as we do that, right, these wounds start to heal and they become scars, and scars are a lot stronger than wounds. Scars tell a story about where we've been, not what we're in now. And as those wounds start to heal and they start to scar over, we start to realize that the golden grace of God starts to paint over it. And our lives start to look different. And is this difficult? Sure. I've told you before, when I was a young pastor, I found my identity and I found my significance in you. Now look, you guys are all really nice people, and I like you a lot. But I don't find myself in you anymore. See, it used to be that every time I preached a sermon, if someone come up and shook my hand and let me know that it was really good, then I thought I was a good pastor. But if somebody come up and they walked out the room because I offended them, or I heard them, or they decided they didn't like it, or I stuttered over my words, or I slurred my speech, and something didn't go the way it was supposed to, then I assumed that I was not just a bad pastor, but a bad person. And why is that? Because we tie our identity not just to who we are, but to what we do. That's what we do. We tie it to our actions. Right? We know that. When I ask you, what do? You respond with who you are. What do you do? Oh, I am a teacher. What do you do? Oh, I am a homemaker. If I responded in what I actually did, you would say, what do you do? And I would say, I talk to large groups of moderately interested people that are sometimes asleep. And you'd be like, oh, you're a pastor. Right? We have tied our identity to our actions because that's the way the world has trained us to do. If you don't look a certain way, if you don't act a certain way, if you don't have a certain socioeconomic status, if you don't vote the right way, then your value has dropped. You have to be what we tell you to be and buy what we tell you to buy and wear what we tell you to wear. And the problem is, if we're not careful, we bring all that baggage into Christianity with us, and we think all of the stuff that we have done or maybe even are doing defines our worth and defines our value because we place our identity in it. And we just keep working harder. If you find your identity in your job, you just work really hard, you get that promotion, you feel better for a while, but then what happens is they have trained you. They've got the carrot on the stick. You got to spend more time working harder so you can get that next bonus, that next promotion. And then at the end of a few years, of a lifetime, you look back and you realize that they can take it all away like that. When you tie your identity to something other than Jesus, other than something that lasts forever, it will fail you, guaranteed. 10 years of college ministry, I would sit down with our college athletes, and I'd say, what are you going to be? What are you going to do when this is done? And they'd say, man, I'm just good at basketball. I said, what's going to happen when you blow out your knee and you can't dunk anymore? I asked one young man, I said, what are people going to value about you when you can no longer hit a free throw? He said, Pastor Aaron, I can't hit a free throw now. And he was devastated. You know why he was devastated? Because his worth was tied to that. His value was tied. His identity was the basketball player. And when that was taken away, what happens when your job is gone? If you put all of your identity in your children, what happens when they grow old? If you put all of your identity in your job, what happens when the economy tanks and everything goes kaput? If you put all your identity in your intellect, what happens when you get my age and it starts to go away? Still got quick reflexes though. What happens? What happens in our lives when we put our identity in things? They will fail you. They will break you. And then when they try to fix you, your side effects will be worse than the symptoms you had before. Guarantee it. But when we put our identity in something that lasts forever, when we start taking off that old shame and that old guilt, when we start taking off the dirty clothes of worrying about what people think about us and worrying about whether or not we're valuable to that person and whether or not am I good enough? When the old has passed away and the new has come, and we put on these beautiful, clean clothes of love and peace and joy, when we are set free from the old because the new has shown up, life looks different. And through the rest of this series, we're gonna start telling you the way God sees you. What if instead of looking at the mirror ourselves or even the mirror of society, we allowed God to be our reflection? Let God be our mirror. And we started to believe the things that he says about us. Not the stuff the world says about you, not even the stuff you say about you, but what God says about you. That you are loved, that you are valued, that you are his child, that you are the apple of his eye, that you have been set free, that you're his friend, that you're not broken, but you're healed by his golden grace. How different could our lives look if we believed that story? If that was our identity? I'm gonna ask you guys to stand. And as you're standing, here in a moment, we're going to sing in response, praising God that we truly are who he says that we are. But for a moment, I'm just gonna ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes. And there may be some of us here today that we need to embrace that a little better. So I'm gonna specifically pray for you before we sing. So if you would say, Aaron, I need something to ground my identity in, stronger than what I'm doing. I need to know that I am a new creation, that I am loved, that I am cared for, that I am valued by my Creator, and that it is in him that I find my identity. Just for a moment, would you just raise your hand with me so I could pray specifically for you? No one's looking around. I'm gonna pray for you right now. God, thank you so much for loving us, for creating us with a purpose, with a plan. Thank you for knowing us more than anyone else and loving us anyway. But I pray right now, as we prepare to sing, for those of us especially that raised our hands, God, that you would touch us, that we would be known by you, that we are a new creation, and we are who you say that we are. In Christ's name, amen.